if we could just start with, some background on yourself.
Sure. I'm from Iowa originally, but I grew up and started my family in Las Vegas, Nevada. Moved back here to Iowa in 2015. Bought our house in Cedar Rapids in 2016. My wife and I have three sons. One is 14. He's an eighth grader this year. The second one is a third grader. He just turned 9. And then we have a 6-month-old baby at home. So we're invested in the school system for quite a while now. I'm a letter carrier with the U.S. Postal Service. I joined the school board 4 years ago to stand up for my neighborhood school. There was a plan to close it down, and someone in the neighborhood needed to step up and speak out for the neighborhood, and so that's how I ended up here.
And so, why are you deciding to run for reelection?
Well, that issue of keeping neighborhood schools open is still on the table. And so I'm still standing up for my neighborhood and all neighborhoods where the school district's facilities plan either want to close down a school or recently, in the case of historic Harrison Elementary School on the west side, they want to tear down that historic building and build a new one. And so there's a lot of people in the community still upset over those plans. I still think we could come up with better plans than the plans that are on the table now. So I'm still speaking up about that. The other issue, though, that I've seen the last 4 years is just the conditions for the people who work in the schools. They're the ones who are educating the kids. They're the ones that do all the hard work of making the school system run. And especially during the COVID pandemic, but it still exists to this day. We have issues with short staffing. We have issues with extra pressure and stress that the people working in the schools deal with. And that goes for teachers, teaching assistants, everybody. And, the pay is never enough. We just had a big presentation on teaching assistants, and they are now making $15 an hour. It was under 13 when I first started, but 15 is still not enough when you account for inflation and the cost of living going up. And so speaking out as a union member myself, as a working class person myself, for the people who work in our schools so they can do the work of educating the kids in the schools is kind of the biggest thing I want to bring to this campaign and to my work on the board if I'm reelected to another term.
And so, during your time, already sitting on the board and such, what have you found your role is?
I would say that's one of the biggest ones. So much. I started in 2019, and so within 6 months, schools were shut down for the COVID pandemic, and oftentimes, and part of it is due to state law, but part of it is due to just an unwillingness by the people who are on the board. And they're all nice people. The people I work with, the people in the administration are all nice people, but they kind of have a different perspective, either from their business background, the members of the board, or the people who work in the administration. They're working in that central role. They don't see as much of the essential work, the frontline work, as you could call it, in the schools and in the community as well. I see a lot of the neighborhoods in the community through my line of work. And so bringing that perspective, being willing when students come and say that they are uncomfortable with a police officer in their building, we've got to take things like that seriously. We had a 40-year-old daycare program at one of our alternative high schools that was shut down in the last 4 years, and people were very upset about that. And from the perspective of the board and from the administration, they said, oh, well, not that many people utilize that program. But for the people who had come through it and for the community that it served, it was very meaningful and really life changing. For what we heard from a lot of people. And so we've got to take those things seriously. It can't just be, marching forward with plans and never changing our perspective. We've really got to listen to people. And that's what I've tried to bring.
And so I know you kind of touched on this a little bit as well, but if you are reelected, what do you hope to achieve?
Well, right now, I do hope we have a bond issue on the ballot. I'm voting no on it personally. And so if it does get voted down, we have to come up with a better plan that doesn't close down schools, that invests in the neighborhood schools as they are. We have one school, Hoover, which is on the west side of Cedar Rapids, which is called what they call a community school. And that's a model where You really involve the parents day to day. You do surveys, find out what people need. And you could do that at every school building and really kind of come up with a plan for what that building is, not just a school in general, the generic school, but that specific neighborhood. And so bringing things like that to our building, I think would be, very important. We just at one of our local middle schools, they have a barber shop they opened up inside the school, and they get barbers to come in and donate haircuts to kids who otherwise might not be able to afford them. And so things like that are going to serve the real needs that kids living in poverty in our community, or just any kid, we've got free lunch for most of the students in our system. Some schools that they qualify on community eligibility. And so schools should be a place for everybody, no matter your background, to grow, learn, and really thrive. And that's what I think I want to keep, I guess, bringing to it, because too often it's what are the test scores? How do we get the test scores higher? And if the kid's going home, doesn't have enough to eat, doesn't have a stable place to live, even, I want them to do well on tests, but there's more pressing problems in their lives and in, what their parents are dealing with, trying to help them. And so we should be part of that conversation and really make school a place where we're working together with everybody in the community, not just the parents, not just the teachers, the city, the state, the federal government. It takes everybody working together to solve the real problems that students and their families face.
And then kind of just my last thing, is there anything that you would want voters to know about you?
To know about me, um, I'm always going to speak up. Right now, there is so much new legislation in the state of Iowa, and I don't think that legislation and kind of the ideas that some people talk about when they talk about public schools, like teachers are the bad guys, so to speak, like they're out there trying to harm children. Those ideas are not, I'm not going to say they're just made up by the people I know, but they come from outside the state. They come from these organizations that are funded by billionaires across the country, and they want to make our schools look bad. They want to make our teachers look bad. And to me, we can't just be like, oh, well, that's not really happening, and kind of try and shove that, under the rug, so to speak. We have to speak out and say, if people are against public schools, we need to know why. And you could ask those people who are pushing those things, funded by billionaires like the Koch brothers, by Betsy DeVos, things like that. But I think it's pretty obvious. They just don't think that a democratic institution like the public schools really serves their interests. But it serves my family's interests. It serves the families in the working class in Cedar Rapids. And if we don't stand up as school board members, as members of our community, and speak out against those things, then it's just going to keep happening. And we're never going to have that firm base for our community, which the public schools are and have been and should be to an even greater degree, I think. And so I'm always going to speak up about things like that. Just as a school board member, not everyone listens that much when you do raise your voice. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that today. And then, since I'm here, and just to kind of reaffirm that idea of what's important to kids, not just in our community, but across the world. You look at what's happening in the Middle East right now. It's like we need a ceasefire in the Gaza war right now, because there's kids in those communities whose neighborhoods are being bombed right now. And I wouldn't want that for my kids. Nobody would want it for their kids. And yet it's happening. And that's not the world that I want for my children. And so I'll speak up for it. I hope other people do. That's the only way to really make change. And like I said, I appreciate the opportunity to do so.